let's shift gears a little bit to the sort of overall. We're doing this conference in 10 days, and on the real-time stream. I guess you certainly now qualify on pretty much all grounds for a significant place in that build out of the architecture. So how do you think things are going in real time, and do you think that it's flash in the pan? Is it just this year's peer-to-peer or what?
No, I think this is a fairly fundamental trend. A lot of people have asked this question of like, is real time, why does anyone want real time? But the way I view it, it's the original form of communication. Real time is how people worked for hundreds of thousands of years since language was invented. When we have a discussion, it's in real time. It's not like I say something and then tomorrow I hear your response. And so I think it's just a more efficient way to communicate with other people. It's a more natural way. And I expect that it will only become more popular.
But it also has the tendency, as Mike Arrington has discussed famously with Robert Scoble, it has the tendency to create or accelerate potentially the so-called mob aspects of communities. Shoot first and think later, or not at all. That kind of thing. I mean, I'm not sure I agree with the overall premise, but I certainly agree that we can see this kind of behavior materializing.
Certainly. Yeah, anything that enables people to connect and coordinate more effectively is inevitably going to enable them to use that power for good or evil. And that's just, the same thing is true with, let's say, a cell phone. Is now groups can coordinate much better, and all of the criminals have their cell phones. The freedom of assembly isn't always going to be I guess a positive thing in everyone's view.
All right. So what do you do about that?
A lot of it just comes down to giving people more tools to control their experience. So, one of the features we've talked about is, for example, just letting people control whether they have comments on their entries, for example, if I just don't want that much, or limiting who can comment. So, if I don't want the whole world commenting, or maybe if a conversation has just gone on for too long and I just want to shut it down, those kinds of features I think may be helpful to add. Mm-hmm. Certainly, even on my own feed, I've had some. Yesterday, I posted some video, and now it's kind of drifted off into the world of 9/11 conspiracies. And so, if I had that feature, I'd probably just shut it off.
So, that sort of gives rise to blacklists and that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, we already have the ability to block users. So, if there's someone who's harassing you or just causing a lot of trouble, you can block them, and they're then unable to view or comment on your entries.
Right. That's a little bit draconian for what we're talking about here, which is more, managing a conversation rather as opposed to just making it, binary on/off. Mm-hmm. So you haven't thought much about.
Well, I mean, I think this may be not quite as big of an issue as. Like it's been talked about quite a bit, but just at least in my usage of FriendFeed, it's pretty rare that a conversation gets to the point where I'd want to kill it, because I think there's occasionally something that's very inflammatory or very just a problematic topic comes up, but that's a very small fraction of the conversations that go on. Most conversations never venture into that.
Yeah, but again, I'm not really talking about killing a conversation, but rather providing tools so that the community can manage it. For example, there are some people who I just won't comment in their streams because they have demonstrated a propensity for editing things that they've said previously, which orphans the comments that are in reaction to it, things like that. So there's a certain kind of self-management that users go through, but the tools are not fine-grained in terms of being able to suggest to somebody, I'm gonna mute you for a little while here because you've made your point, and I'd like you to move on, and if you don't move on, then I'll block you.
Right.
Something like that. I'm not suggesting that this is your problem right now, but
Right.
the passion that real time engenders is definitely something that has a quality to itself that we haven't seen elsewhere.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think there is still some unsolved issues there. I don't know. I don't know what all the answers are, but there's also. I think we've learned that it's important to keep a lot of these things relatively simple. So you have to be careful about adding too many of these different features because there is, a tendency to, for every problem that comes up, I can think of kind of 3 different things that might address it. But actually making it, creating those features, maintaining them, and then effectively communicating them to users what their purpose is, what the right time to use them is, what the interface is, and what it really means can be a little bit of a challenge at times.
What about, I lost it. It was something about, it's a feature I've asked you about on a direct message several times with no response, which is what about commenting, being able to comment directly in line? In other words, more, threaded comments.
Oh, like a nested comments.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily suggesting that, if there was some sort of nomenclature for doing this or some sort of signal where you could, basically go in and say, for example, I liked this comment rather than I liked the entire thread. Yeah, that's an example of the same.
That's actually like a great example of something that I think we all like the feature. Maybe me more than others even, but it's just a matter of we haven't come up with a UI yet that we're all happy with. But on the back end, we've actually made a change probably about a month ago, which is invisible to everyone, but enables that feature, among other things. The way that we store and manage comments was moved over to a more general purpose infrastructure, so we can more easily implement that feature.
And so is the answer that the UI, you're not happy with the UI yet?
Yeah, the answer is that it's largely held up just on figuring out a UI that we're all happy with. We now have technically, no reason that we can't very easily add it, but it's just a matter of figuring out a UI that we're happy with and that won't make the page too complex. We don't want to have smiley faces on every single line, for example. And so we just have to work out what the right interface is for that. But that's actually true overall with comments, that we're going to need to spend, I think, a little bit of time looking at them and figuring out how to add maybe a little bit more richness to the comments because for example, last week we launched the feature where you can attach files to an entry. So if you have like a Word document or just a text file or whatever it is, you can attach it to an entry. Well, logically, I should be able to do the same thing with a comment as well, right? If someone has some other revision of it that they want to attach, that should be easy to do. And so we don't currently support that, but it's kind of like a logical feature to have. And it's something I think people would like to have. But again, we would have to make sure we can come up with a UI that's still lightweight so it doesn't become, part of the reason the comments work is because it's so easy to leave a comment. It's just a little box. It's kind of like I am. So working out the right UI so that it doesn't become too heavyweight and too much to manage is really the challenge there.
So we're talking less than a day, more than a day, and less than a decade.
Yes. Yes, unfortunately UI problems turn out to be the hardest in many cases because it's a much more subjective thing than a lot of the technology. Technology, if I write a piece of code, either it works or it doesn't work, but a user interface, I might come up with something that I really like, but someone else on the team thinks it's awful. Or likewise, they might come up with something they love, but I think is horrendous. And so generally as a team, we don't typically release a feature unless we're all at least moderately happy with it, because once you put something out there, it becomes a lot of times very difficult to change it because even if only 20% of your users like it and a lot of them it takes away from the experience, those 20% will be very upset if you change the feature in a dramatic way. So
more than a month and less than A month and a half?
I don't know. I would like to have it very soon, but it's.
I mean, the reason that I'm
Yeah,
pressing this
we
is
work on a fairly short schedule, so it's very difficult for me to give anything other than just extremely crude guesses that it's something that we're interested in doing, but at this time we have just a couple of features that we launched real-time search, and our next thing on that front is that we want to do the ability to subscribe to those searches, so that's definitely the next step there. We want to get out the next version of the API. We just did themes, and we want to do a couple more things on themes. We want to enable people to theme their groups, for example, so that they can have like a more kind of branded experience there, and also just to launch a few more themes that are kind of in the pipeline. But beyond that, the next step is essentially we do this process probably once every 2 months where we just all get together and go through essentially all of the ideas that we have or that people have suggested and figure out what we think is the next step for the next couple of months. And so I think we're doing that maybe next week. So I don't actually have, none of us actually knows the answer to these questions because we haven't gone through that process.
well, I mean, now that you've brought track back, pretty much, it sort of begs these other questions. So this is the bed that you're making, and you'll have to lie in it. There's going to be more pressure for you to innovate here.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly agree though with the idea of like the liking comments and pulling out the best comments, because there is a lot. Really the best content on FriendFeed is in those comments a lot of times. And so to be able to highlight the best ones.
Right, and I use, and others use likes as a method of broadcasting over Twitter and other, micro message networks. So it's a way of not only telling people about something that's going on, but also, through the ff.im link, pointing them back into what is going on.
Right.
But so much of the time, this goes to this whole crowd, behavior issue. When you say, I really liked, when you like the post on the Holocaust, it's like, I don't like the Holocaust.
Yeah, I did a little post on this once on FriendFeed where I did a screenshot of like, this is how you should interpret it. We just kept the word short. It said, I changed the link text from like to, I like that you have chosen to share this entry with us, which is more the spirit of it is I like that you shared this with us, not necessarily I like the Holocaust or I like whatever the tragedy of the day is.